everybody, it's Becky Ziemba with Nebraska Realty. Today I have the last story in our 4 stories from Once Upon a Property. So today I was going to read to you Snow White. This one is all about a first-time homebuyer. So, Snow White. Once upon a time, a queen sat embroidering by her window as the snowflakes fell like feathers from the wintry sky. She gazed out as she worked her needle to admire the stark white winter beauty. But as she did, she unknowingly pricked her finger and fell from it 3 droplets of blood into the snow. When the queen saw how bright and beautiful it looked, she wished for a child that possessed the same beauty. In time, her wish came true. She had a daughter with glowing skin and bright red lips and silky ebony hair. The earth had not yet seen a being so radiant. She named her Snow White. But sadly, very soon after, the queen fell ill, and a few days later she tragically died. Snow White's father, the king, then found a new wife, a stunning, beguiling woman who possessed a vain air and a magical looking glass. So there's baby Snow White and her mother sitting in the rocking chair. She would on a daily basis consult the looking glass and say, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the looking glass would answer, "You are the fairest of them all." The new queen was content, for she knew the looking glass spoke only the truth. But as time went on, Snow White grew more and more beautiful, and in time it was clear to her that it was clear to see that she was far more beautiful than the queen herself. So one day the queen went to the mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of all?" The mirror honestly answered, "Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but Snow White is fairer than you." The queen scoffed loud enough to wake the entire kingdom. She became green with envy. From that hour, her heart turned against Snow White. She hated her. In a fit of rage, the queen sent for the huntsman and said, "Take the girl out into the woods so that I may no longer set eyes on her." The huntsman agreed and led Snow White away. But at once the poor girl began to weep, saying, "Oh, dear huntsman, do not harm me. I promise I will go away into the wild woods and never return home again." And as she was so lovely, the huntsman had pity on her. There's the evil queen in her mirror. The huntsman said, "Go away then, poor child." Now, Snow White found herself quite alone in the wild woods and not knowing which way to turn. She began to run over the sharp stones and through the thorn bushes. She felt the wild beasts after her, but they did her no harm. She ran as long as her feet would carry her. And when the evening drew near, she came to a little house and went inside to rest. Everything was very small, but pretty and clean as possible. There stood a little table covered with a white cloth and laid with 7 little plates, and 7 knives, and 7 forks, and 7 drinking glasses. By the wood stood 7 little beds side by side, covered with clean white quilts. Snow White, tired from her journey, laid down on one to have a rest. There's the huntsman banishing Snow White. When it was quite dark, the owner of the home returned. They were 7 little men who had dug among the mountains. They saw that someone had been there, as nothing was quite as they had left it. The first one said, "Who has been sitting in my little chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third, "Who has been taking my little loaf?" The fourth, "Who has been tasting my porridge?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my little fork?" The sixth said, "Who has been cutting with my little knife?" The seventh said, "Who has been laying on my bed?" Then they looked at his bed, and Snow White laying there, soundly asleep. "Oh, goodness, oh, gracious, what a beautiful thing is this?" they whispered. Snow White awoke and saw the 7 little men. She was very frightened, but they seemed quite friendly. They asked her what her name was and how she came to be in their home. She told them her tale and asked if she might be able to stay in their little home until she could find one of her own. The 7 men consulted one another, coming to an agreement, saying, "If you will keep our house and wash and cook and make the beds and sew and knit and keep everything tidy and clean, you may stay with us for as long as you want." Snow White was relieved to be safeguarded in the little home with such kind little men. So relieved, she was rather willing to overlook the reality of having 7 roommates, but she agreed and signed her name on a year-long rental contract to lodge in their cottage. So there they are, signing their contract with the 7 little men. And so she began her stay, earning her place by keeping the house in good order. In the morning, the little men went to the mountain to dig for gold, leaving Snow White alone. But they warned her, saying, "Beware of your stepmother, for she will soon know you are here, and let no one into the house." Now the queen, thinking Snow White had disappeared for good, felt quite sure that she was the most beautiful woman in the land. And so she went to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And the glass answered, "Queen, thou art a beauty rare, but Snow White, living in the glen with 7 little men, is 1,000 times more fair." This made the queen very angry, for the looking glass always spoke the truth. She knew that Snow White must still be living nearby. So she thought about how she could put an end to her. And thus she hatched a plan. The queen went into a secret chamber and concocted a poisonous apple. It was so beautiful to look upon that anyone who should see it would long for it, but whoever ate it, even a bite, would immediately perish. When the apple was finally ready, the queen painted her face and clothed herself as a peasant woman. In this disguise, she journeyed across 7 mountains until she came to a quaint little home of the 7 little men. She knocked on the door, and Snow White put her head out the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in. My 7 little roommates told me not to." "All right," said the woman in disguise. "I was merely here to offer a housewarming gift." For a moment, Snow White was almost fooled, but when she reached her hand out to take the apple, she noticed something. A small black mole on the side of the peasant lady's mouth. A chill shot down Snow White's spine, and she knew the small black mole belonged to her evil stepmother, and that she was here to be rid of Snow White for good. Snow White slammed the window shut and watched as her stepmother slunk away in disguise. "I'll be back for you yet," cried the queen as she disappeared into the distance, surely to continue plotting Snow White's demise. Okay, so there's the evil queen with her apple that she just concocted, and then there she is disguised as a peasant lady talking to Snow White. Snow White, distraught with the attempt on her life, sat by her windowsill as a little chipmunk scurried over. Sensing her melancholy mood, the chipmunk spoke to Snow White. "What is wrong?" asked the woodland creature. "Oh, Chipmunk," moaned Snow White, "I must find a new place to live. My evil stepmother knows where I reside. She will surely stop at nothing to destroy me. I also do not think I'm fit to have 7 roommates. The chores are becoming production, if I'm being honest." "Follow me," said the chipmunk, "for I know exactly whom you must speak." So Snow White followed the chipmunk through the woods until they reached a lovely cabin. The chipmunk tapped its claws upon the window, prompting a man with kind eyes to open the door. "Who is this man?" whispered Snow White. But Snow White was not such a skilled whisperer. Overhearing her remark, the man answered, saying, "My name is Magnus, and I am a realtor, a member of the National Association of Realtors." "I know not of this title, nor the noble association of which you speak," said Snow White. Magnus invited Snow White and the chipmunk into his office. He explained that he was an expert in the woods community and its surrounding kingdoms. He knew every inch of the wilderness and every creature in it. He also knew the best places to reside based on people's greatest wishes. Do you know of a place for me? Asked Snow White. A faraway home at least 20 villages away from here, to the west? Snow White thought to herself, surely that will be an undetectable from my wicked stepmother's mirror, and impenetrable from her evil ways, for I know she will strike again. I know of a retired knight who is parting with his current cottage, seeking to move closer to his grandchildren. It is small and exactly 20 villages to the west, as you desire, assured Magnus. Let us go see this at once, demanded Snow White. So she and Magnus trekked through the woods and beyond until they came upon it. The adorable little cottage was ideally situated upon a hill, perfect for a person without 7 roommates. But, most importantly, it was beyond the reach of the Queen's looking-glass. I must have it, said Snow White, and Magnus began to draw up the contract. So Snow White went home to gather her belongings and bid a teary goodbye to her 7 little roommates. We almost skipped that picture. There's Magnus and Snow White seeing the cottage. I'm sorry, she said, hugging them in a group embrace, but I must go out on my own for my own well-being and for your safety as well. I will never forget your kindness in taking me in. We will forever be tied in friendship. Snow White soon made herself at home. She spent the rest of the days returning to the little cottage, turning the cottage into the most charming of residences. She hosted backyard parties for her neighbors, her former roommates, and often took in wounded animals from the woods. But most importantly, she evaded the evil advances of a certain queen, who knew not that she was out there living happily ever after, which she did for years and years and years, thanks to the realtor, Magnus. So there's Snow White, Magnus, and the little dwarfs. The end. So in that one, obviously, Snow White was a first-time homebuyer. She knew she needed to get away. She knew kind of what she wanted, but not 100% certain. A great real estate agent will help you kind of fine-tune what you're looking for, but also we have a vast knowledge of different homes that are available, things that are potentially coming to the market soon. So really, you want to have a relationship with your real estate agent that you trust and that you want their opinion. It's your choice to make which house is ultimately for you, but we can often recommend things and show you things that you might not have picked out on your own because of one little thing. So let me know how I can help. I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.